Her name was Seraphine. A name that once echoed with grace and promise in the halls of the kingdom of Alaris. Seraphine grew up in a small, vibrant village on the outskirts of the kingdom, nestled between the Whispering Forest and the Elthorn River. The village was known for its rich traditions in song, magic, and the divine teachings of the Alien Church, where worshippers revered ancient deities tied to nature, the elements, and celestial forces. Seraphine's family was well regarded in the community. Her mother, a talented healer, was one of the village's most trusted figures, while her father was a respected craftsman who worked with enchanted woods to create beautiful, functional artifacts. Seraphine, in turn, inherited her mother's affinity for nature magic, a gift that was rare and cherished. As a child, Seraphine could coax flowers to bloom and command the wind to carry messages, abilities that were admired by the villagers but also closely scrutinized by the church's priests. She grew up surrounded by love and support, with friends who saw her as a beacon of light and hope. Her early life was idyllic, filled with laughter, song, and the anticipation of the day she would officially join the Alien Order and become a full-fledged practitioner of her magic. But the simplicity of her life would soon be shattered, and the magic she once cherished would be twisted into something that would define her for the rest of her life. The curse. The curse began as all things do, innocently enough. Seraphine had always felt a strange pull toward the Whispering Forest, a place where the veil between the mortal world and the spiritual realm was thinnest. One evening, as she ventured deep into the woods to gather herbs for her mother, Seraphine encountered an ancient entity, a spirit who had long been forgotten by the living. Its name was Verek, a being of darkness and shadow, neither good nor evil, but a manifestation of the world's untold secrets. Verek spoke to Seraphine in a voice like 1,000 winds, offering her a gift, the ability to see the truth of all things, to understand the hidden secrets of the world, and to unravel the lies that held society together. In exchange, she was to bind herself to Verek's power, a power that would take root within her soul, changing her forever. Seraphine, driven by an innate curiosity and a desire to become more than she was, accepted the spirit's offer. The power coursed through her veins, awakening abilities far beyond what she had known. Her eyes began to glow faintly, and she could hear whispers in the wind, whispers of things that shouldn't be known. But the gift came with an unforeseen cost. The power that Verek had bestowed upon her was not a simple blessing, it was a curse. Over time, Seraphine realized that the truths she could now perceive were not always kind, and they often drove her to madness. She saw the hidden fears of people, their darkest desires, and the blood-soaked histories of the land. More disturbing still, the magic that flowed through her began to warp her appearance. Her once radiant skin grew pale and cracked, her hair darkened to an unnatural black, and her eyes burned with a sickly, otherworldly glow. Whispers of a dark aura began to follow her wherever she went. The village that had once adored her now recoiled in fear. To them, Seraphine was no longer the innocent girl who could heal wounds with a touch or call the wind with a song. She had become an abomination. The more she tried to hide her newfound powers, the more they grew, and the more she suffered from their effects. The truth she had gained was both a gift and a curse, driving her to the edge of insanity. Why she was blamed for the curse? The villagers, unable to understand the true nature of Seraphine's affliction, began to see her as a threat. Whispers of her dark transformation spread like wildfire, fueled by fear and ignorance. They saw her glowing eyes, her cracked skin, and her ability to uncover their deepest secrets, and they believed her to be an agent of darkness, perhaps even possessed by a demon. The Alien Church, once a sanctuary of knowledge, declared that she had been corrupted by an ancient evil, and that her powers were a direct affront to the gods. One fateful night, a series of mysterious misfortunes befell the village. Crops failed unexpectedly, a fire broke out in the heart of the town, and a beloved elder passed away under suspicious circumstances. The villagers, already suspicious of Seraphine's transformation, blamed her for these tragedies. They believed that the curse within her had somehow spread to the land itself, poisoning the very fabric of their world. Seraphine, devastated and bewildered by the accusations, attempted to plead her innocence. She sought to explain that the power within her was a gift, one she had never intended to abuse, but her words fell on deaf ears. The village leaders, including her own mother and father, turned their backs on her, afraid of the very daughter they had raised. Her father, once so proud of her gifts, now saw only a dangerous, uncontrollable force that threatened everything he held dear. The exile. The moment of her exile came during the trial of the cursed, a public event held at the heart of the village. The village council, led by the high priestess of the alien church, Lady Elira, decided that Seraphine's fate would be determined in front of the entire village. The air was thick with tension as Seraphine stood before her community, her eyes burning with the knowledge of their deepest secrets, her heart heavy with the weight of their judgment. Lady Elira accused Seraphine of being a harbinger of doom, of bringing darkness upon the land. The priests chanted in unison, calling upon the gods to purge her of her curse. But Seraphine refused to be silenced. With tears in her eyes, she revealed the truth, that the curse had never been her choice, and that she had sought only to understand the world better, to wield the power she had been granted with wisdom. But her words were drowned out by the angry cries of the villagers. In the end, the council decided that Seraphine must be cast out. Banished from the village, she was stripped of her family's name and her title as a future member of the alien order. Her mother, unable to speak in her defense, wept silently, while her father stood motionless, unable to even look at her. The villagers turned their backs on her as she was led out of the gates, her heart broken and shattered. As she wandered into the wilderness, her mind filled with both fury and sorrow, the power of the curse twisted within her, taking her deeper into the unknown. The whispering forest called to her once more, and for the first time, Seraphine felt as though the forest was no longer just a place of magic, it was her only home. The curse was no longer just a burden, it was a part of her, a dark companion that would follow her into the world beyond the village. Thus began her journey, not just as an outcast, but as someone who would soon learn that the curse, far from being her undoing, might be the very key to unlocking a power that would shape the future of the world. Had always been a place of mystery. It was said to be the home of ancient spirits, beings who lived between the mortal realm and the ethereal plane, their powers tied to the ebb and flow of the world's magic. But Seraphine never knew that her encounter with the spirit, Varek, would set the course of her life toward tragedy. It happened on a stormy evening, the wind howling through the trees as if warning her of the danger that awaited. The forest had always whispered to Seraphine, calling her to its depths. But it was only that night, under a blood-red moon, that she ventured deeper than ever before. There, in the heart of the forest, she found the stone circle, ancient, worn, and hidden beneath centuries of creeping vines. Within its center stood Varek. The spirit was not like any other being Seraphine had encountered. It was neither man nor beast, but a shifting form of shadow and light, an entity with an aura that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. Seraphine, entranced by its presence, approached without fear. Varek's voice echoed in her mind, not in words, but in images and sensations. It offered her a deal, the ability to unravel the world's deepest secrets, to know the truths that no mortal had ever been meant to understand. It was a gift that promised untold knowledge, but at a cost. She would become bound to Varek's essence, a part of its eternal realm, forever intertwined with its shadowy power. In her youthful arrogance and boundless curiosity, Seraphine accepted the gift. But with that acceptance came a shift within her. She felt her soul tethered to something darker, something older than the world itself. The power filled her veins, transforming her from the girl she had been into something altogether different. Her eyes began to glow, her skin took on an unnatural pallor, and her once bright magic grew twisted and unpredictable. The power that had once been a gift now felt like a burden. As time passed, Seraphine began to see the truths of the world, things no mortal mind was meant to bear. She saw the greed of kings, the betrayals of lovers, the cruelties of gods, and the bloodshed that ran through the history of her people. But it wasn't just knowledge that she gained, it was a sense of disconnection, an alienation from the world around her. She no longer fit in her own skin, and the world seemed to warp in response to her newfound sight. The curse was not just the power itself, but the isolation it brought with it. She became both an observer and a victim of the darkness she had uncovered. She could see the lies people told, hear their unspoken fears, and feel their unacknowledged guilt. The more she learned, the more she realized that the world was not the beautiful, harmonious place she had once believed it to be. Instead, it was a tapestry of hidden fears and unresolved desires, and she was the only one who could truly see it. #######. The emotional toll of rejection and betrayal ***. The truth of her curse did not remain hidden for long. It wasn't just the power she wielded that caused the villagers to fear her, it was the profound change it wrought in her. Seraphine's transformation was visible, undeniable. Her once warm eyes, full of hope, now gleamed with an unsettling glow. Her skin, pale as marble, was marked with faint cracks, as though the very essence of the curse was seeping out of her. She could feel the fear in the air whenever she walked into the village, the whispers behind her back, the furtive glances that followed her every move. It was Lady Elira, the high priestess of the alien church, who first spoke openly of her suspicions. She claimed that Seraphine had become the vessel of an ancient demon, a being of shadow that had taken root in her soul. The church, which once celebrated the purity of nature's magic, now saw Seraphine's abilities as unnatural, an affront to the divine will. Her magic, which had once been used to heal and protect, was now viewed as a manifestation of evil. But it wasn't just the church that turned against her, it was her family. Her mother, who had always been her greatest supporter, began to distance herself, afraid that her daughter had become tainted by dark forces. Seraphine's father, a man of logic and reason, could not bear the thought that his beloved daughter had become something beyond human understanding. He could not accept that the girl he had raised, his bright, compassionate Seraphine, was now a monster in their eyes. The most painful betrayal, however, came from her best friend, Lysandra, who had once been her closest confidant. Lysandra was the first to suggest that Seraphine's power was dangerous, that it was not a gift but a curse that would destroy them all. In the end, it was Lysandra who gave the final push, telling the village that Seraphine had become a threat and should be exiled before her powers consumed them all. That betrayal cut the deepest. Lysandra had been the one person Seraphine believed would stand by her, no matter what. To hear her friend, her only true ally, publicly denounce her felt like the ultimate abandonment. In the end, Lysandra had chosen the safety of the village over the bond they had once shared. ############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################### out was the day she truly realized the extent of her isolation. The village, once a place of warmth and connection, had become a prison of fear. As she was led to the gates, her mother and father stood silent, their gazes a mixture of sorrow and fear. The entire village watched her leave, some with pity, others with anger, but none with compassion. Her exile marked the moment when she became a fugitive in her own land. The curse, which had once been a quiet whisper within her, now thrummed loudly in her chest, a constant reminder of the price she had paid for her foolishness. With each step she took away from the village, she felt the weight of her alienation. She was no longer the Seraphine who had known the love of a family, the warmth of friendship, or the acceptance of her people. She was now a cursed outcast, hunted by the very world she had once loved. As she wandered through the wilderness, the harshness of nature seemed to reflect her inner turmoil. The trees loomed over her like silent sentinels, and the winds whispered words of warning that she could no longer ignore. Her body was no longer the same. Her once delicate frame had become gaunt, her magic out of control, surging in unpredictable ways. The whispering forest, which had once felt like a haven, now felt like a prison. The voices that had once been comforting now felt like a constant barrage, each one reminding her of the weight of her curse. She could hear the distant sounds of the village, but they were no longer a call to home, they were a reminder of what she had lost. In the silence of her exile, Seraphine came to terms with the truth. The curse was not something that could be undone. It was a part of her, woven into the very fabric of her being. But perhaps in that darkness there was something else, something that could guide her toward a new path, one that might bring redemption or at the very least understanding. The world outside her village was vast, unknown, and hostile, but Seraphine was no longer the innocent girl she had once been. She was a cursed soul, yes, but she was also something more. And that something would be the key to unlocking her future, no matter how bleak it seemed. The mountain was not a place that could be found on any map. It was a legend passed down through whispered stories in the villages, an ancient site that lay hidden deep within the uncharted heart of the whispering forest. Some said it was a place where the gods themselves had once walked. Others claimed it was the cradle of the alien magic, the source of all power that had long been forgotten by the people. What was certain, however, was that the mountain was a place of profound mystical energy, where the very air seemed to hum with an otherworldly force. The elders spoke of it in hushed tones, warning that only those who were truly worthy could reach its peak. Those who sought its power often disappeared, leaving only faded stories and unsolved mysteries behind. The mountain stood as both a beacon and a warning, a place of immense power but also of great risk. The mountain itself was an enormous stone formation, towering above the forest canopy like the jagged spine of some ancient, slumbering beast. Its surface was covered with intricate carvings, some so old that they had worn down to mere shadows of their original shapes. At the summit, a massive stone altar stood, silent and waiting, once used by the ancient civilization that had long since vanished. The land around the mountain was untouched, wild and untamed, filled with thick, dense fog and towering trees whose roots twisted like serpents beneath the earth. It was said that nature itself was intertwined with the mountain, and its energy flowed through the trees, the streams, and the very rocks beneath your feet. Those who stood at the summit of the mountain could feel the pulse of the earth beneath them, a deep, resonating rhythm that echoed through the air like a heartbeat. Seraphine had heard the legends, of course, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of the place. It called to her, not with words but with a magnetic force, an invisible pull that drew her deeper into the heart of the forest. The deeper she ventured, the more she could feel it, the hum of power beneath her feet, the vibrations in the air, the inexplicable sensation that she was moving closer to something ancient, something alive. ####### The Song of Power *. It was on the 7th night of her journey through the wilderness that Seraphine first heard the song. She had been wandering for days, battling exhaustion and hunger, barely finding shelter as the cold winds of the mountains swept through the trees. Her heart ached with isolation, and the curse that twisted inside her seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. Her magic, which had once felt like a gift, now pulsed with unpredictability, sometimes soothing, other times chaotic. She felt as though she were walking on the edge of something far greater than herself, unable to control it, unable to understand it. And then one night as she camped near a small creek, she heard it, a soft, melodic hum, like the sound of wind through an ancient instrument, carried on the breeze. At first she thought it was a figment of her tired mind, a hallucination brought on by the loneliness and the magic that burned within her. But the sound persisted, growing louder, clearer. It was not a simple wind, nor was it a bird or animal. It was something else, something alive, and it called to her with a voice that resonated deep within her chest. The song was not a lullaby, nor a hymn of peace. It was something powerful, ancient, and familiar. The more Seraphine listened, the more she realized that the song was connected to her curse, her magic, her fate. It was as if the song had always been a part of her, something that had been waiting for her to hear it. It wasn't a song of sorrow or joy but of balance, of life and death, of the earth and the sky, of power and restraint. The song of power had found her. She felt its pull like a tether, drawing her closer to the heart of the forest, closer to the mountain. It was not just an auditory experience, it was a feeling that consumed her very being. Her chest tightened as though the song had wrapped itself around her heart, and with every note, a surge of power coursed through her veins. The curse within her, the darkness that had plagued her since her encounter with Varek, suddenly seemed to hum in harmony with the song, as if the two were one and the same. #######. The first time she hears the song and feels its pull *. Seraphine did not hesitate. The pull of the song was undeniable, and though part of her still feared the unknown, another part of her, a part that had long been buried beneath the weight of her exile and curse, felt a glimmer of hope. She stood up, leaving her camp behind, and followed the song. As she walked through the dense woods, the forest seemed to open up before her, the trees parting as though they were making way for her. The further she went, the more the song wrapped around her, filling her mind with visions and sensations. She saw flashes of ancient rituals, long-forgotten dances performed by people whose faces she could not recognize, their bodies draped in flowing robes made of natural materials. She saw glimpses of magical symbols carved into stones, glowing faintly with the same light that now burned in her eyes. The power was not just in the song, it was all around her, embedded in the very land she walked upon. And then, as the song reached a crescendo, she arrived at the base of the mountain. The stone altar loomed before her, its weathered surface still holding the remnants of long-forgotten rituals. The air around it was thick with energy, and the song echoed from within the stone itself, as if the very foundation of the mountain was alive with it. Seraphine took a deep breath, her pulse quickening. She stepped forward, feeling the magic surging within her, syncing with the rhythm of the song. The power that had once felt like a curse now felt like a calling, a force she could finally understand. Her eyes, glowing with that unnatural light, flickered as the song enveloped her. For the first time since her exile, Seraphine felt that she was not alone. The song had found her, and she had found her purpose. The song was not a weapon, was not a burden. It was a force of nature, a guide, leading her to the mountain to unlock the full potential of her magic. With the music of the earth coursing through her, she realized that her curse was not an end, it was a beginning. In the stillness of that moment, as the song echoed through the air, Seraphine knew, the mountain had chosen her. After days of grueling travel, Seraphine finally stood before the mountain. The stone formation rose before her like a living monument, its towering spires bathed in the light of the twilight moon. The air around the mountain crackled with an ancient energy, a palpable force that seemed to hum in resonance with her own curse. The path that had once felt uncertain and treacherous now felt like a long-awaited return. She had made it, despite the dangers, despite her doubts. The song of power that had called her was now within her reach. But the mountain was no simple sanctuary, it was a place of trials, where only those worthy could unlock its mysteries. Before her, the stone altar lay, but it was surrounded by a mystical barrier, shimmering faintly like a veil woven from moonlight. It was as though the mountain itself was testing her, waiting for her to prove that she was ready for what lay ahead. The barrier shimmered, but it did not let her pass. Seraphine's heart beat faster. She had come this far, but was she truly worthy of the power it promised? #######. The trial of the mounting asterisk. The ground beneath her feet trembled slightly as the song of power began to rise once more intense than before. It was as though the mountain was responding to her very presence, recognizing her as its destined heir. But this power came with a price. Seraphine took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs, and stepped forward, reaching out toward the shimmering barrier. As her fingers brushed the energy, a sudden vision gripped her, a vision of the past, present, and future, all swirling together like a tempest. The whispering forest, once lush and full of life, was now in decay. She saw the village where she had grown up, but in its place was ruin, houses reduced to ashes, her people scattered, and the ruins of an ancient civilization that had once thrived. But among these desolate ruins, Seraphine also saw herself, standing tall at the center of a great storm, her arms raised in defiance. The curse she bore was not a punishment, but a key, ****, the catalyst **** that could either save or destroy everything. Her destiny was now intertwined with the mounting's power, and the vision showed her the cost of failure. She could either embrace the curse and unlock its potential, or let it consume her, dragging the world down into darkness with her. The vision faded, leaving Seraphine breathless and shaken. The trial had not been one of brute strength or willpower, but of acceptance. The mounting had shown her the truth. The curse was not a thing to be feared, but to be embraced. Her magic, her connection to the song, was not an accident. It was part of her. She was not a victim of the curse. She was its heir, chosen to wield its power. The barrier before her flickered and then dissolved like mist in the wind, allowing her to pass. The awakening of the power. The moment Seraphine stepped past the barrier, the air seemed to shift around her. The ground beneath her feet thrummed with energy, vibrating through her very bones. The song of power was louder now, reverberating through the stone walls of the mountain, filling the air with a deep, resonant hum. It was as though the song had reached its crescendo, and now it was pouring into her, flooding her body and soul with a force beyond comprehension. Her body reacted instinctively. Magic surged through her like a tidal wave, untamed, wild, and powerful. Her curse, once a heavy weight that threatened to pull her under, now felt like a lightning storm crackling in her veins, waiting to be unleashed. She could feel it within her, the raw essence of the curse, the ancient magic that had been bound to her by Varek. But now, with the mounting's power coursing through her, she realized it was not just the curse she wielded, it was life itself, the raw, untapped force of the earth and sky, the balance between light and shadow. Her eyes burned with an intense glow as she reached out to the altar. The stones beneath her feet began to hum, responding to her touch. The carvings on the altar, ancient symbols of forgotten magic, began to glow with vibrant light, each one pulsating in time with the beat of her heart. As her hand hovered above the altar, a bright flash of energy surged through her. The song of power was no longer just a sound, it was a living entity, a consciousness that intertwined with her own. It whispered to her, offering her knowledge, understanding, and the power to reshape the world. Her internal transformation. As the energy of the mounting flowed into her, Seraphine felt her magic change. It no longer felt like a curse, but a gift. The darkness that had once weighed her down now sang in harmony with the magic of the mounting, and she realized that her powers were not something to be feared, they were a part of the natural balance of the world. She had been chosen not just for her strength, but for her ability to embrace both light and darkness, to wield the power of creation and destruction. Seraphine's body shuddered with the force of the transformation, her soul torn between fear and awe. She was no longer the girl who had been cast out by her village, no longer the outcast burdened by a curse. She was reborn, empowered by the very magic that had once twisted her into something unrecognizable. The curse, the song, the mounting, ***, they were all a part of her now ***. a force that flowed through her veins and into the world around her. Her magic had expanded, she could feel it now, pulsing in the air, vibrating in the ground beneath her feet. The wind around her shifted, bending to her will, and the stones of the mountain seemed to call to her, acknowledging her newfound strength. Her sight was sharper, clearer, as though the veil of illusion that had clouded her perception was finally lifted. She could see the threads of magic that wove through the world, the delicate balance of energy that connected all living things. And she could sense the forces at play in the world, forces of darkness and light, of life and death, that now bent to her will. Seraphine stood at the summit, her heart racing, her senses alive with the power that coursed through her. She had come to the mountain seeking answers, seeking a way to break her curse. But now she realized that the curse was not something to be undone, it was a part of her, a power that she could control and use to shape the future. With the mountain's magic now fully awakened within her, Seraphine was no longer just cursed. She was transformed, empowered by the forces of nature, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The mountain had chosen her, not to break her but to empower her. Seraphine's journey back to her village was not one of triumph, but of solemn reckoning. The mountain had transformed her, unlocked her power, and given her the clarity she sought. But with that power came the undeniable truth that she could no longer live in the shadows of the past. The village, the people who had once been her family, were now a distant memory, one she both longed to reconcile with and feared to face. The curse had shaped her existence, but the mountain had shown her that it was not the curse that had made her an outcast, it was the people's fear of what they didn't understand. As she approached the village's borders, she could see the familiar shapes of the thatched cottages through the trees, the towering stone walls that had once kept her safe, but now felt like a prison. The village had changed since her exile, new houses had been built, and the once lively marketplace was now subdued, the air heavy with a silence that seemed to echo her return. The whispers of her absence had always lingered in the air, but now they had transformed into an undeniable presence. The cursed child had returned, and she was no longer the weak, powerless girl they had exiled. The first encounter with those who exiled her ***. Seraphine paused just outside the village, her hand hovering over her heart. The once familiar faces she had known, her neighbors, her childhood friends, were now strangers to her. She could feel their gaze upon her from the edges of the village. Some watched from behind windows, their eyes wide with fear or suspicion. Others stared from the shadows, their faces etched with disbelief and awe. The cursed one had returned, but she was no longer just the outcast they had cast aside. She was something more now. The tension in the air was palpable as she walked into the village square. The usual bustle of merchants and townsfolk was stilled, as though the very life of the village had been frozen by her return. As Seraphine passed by the old well, she caught sight of an elderly woman, Mira ***, her former neighbor and a woman who had once treated her like a daughter. The woman's expression flickered between recognition and fear, her hands shaking as she clutched the wooden cane at her side. "Seraphine?" she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flickered to Seraphine's glowing gaze, a hint of dread in her gaze. You've changed." The words were soft but laden with 1,000 unspoken things. The same woman who had once scolded her playfully for running wild through the village now shrank away, her back pressed against the stone wall. The villagers began to murmur among themselves, their whispers growing louder as Seraphine continued to move through the square, her eyes never leaving the familiar faces now turned away, facing the pain of rejection. The first place she went was the old stone temple where the trial had taken place, where the village council had condemned her as a threat, a danger to their peace. The memories of that day rushed back, of the words of accusation, the fear in their eyes, the cold, dismissive verdict that had condemned her to exile. Lysandra, her best friend, had stood among them, silent, her face an unreadable mask as they cast Seraphine out of their world. Now, standing at the edge of the temple's entrance, Seraphine could see the memorial they had built, a stone marker engraved with the date of her exile and a blessed prayer for her soul. They had believed her cursed, and now she was back, not as the broken girl they had cast away, but as a force that could shake their very existence. Her heart raced. Lysandra would be here, somewhere, just as she had been on that fateful day. Seraphine's body tensed at the thought. She hadn't seen Lysandra in years, since the betrayal. The same woman who had once shared her deepest secrets, whose friendship had meant more to her than anything, had turned her back on her when she needed her most. The rejection still stung, and Seraphine wasn't sure she was ready to face it again. But she had no choice. She needed to see Lysandra, to understand if the bond they had shared could ever be repaired. She needed to face the truth of what had happened, even if it tore her apart. Confronting Lysandra. Seraphine found her at the edge of the village, standing by the same familiar oak tree where they had spent hours as children, talking about their dreams and fears. But now Lysandra stood there alone, her posture rigid, her eyes hard, like a woman who had seen too much, suffered too long. "Lysandra," Seraphine called softly, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and resentment. Lysandra turned slowly, her eyes widening in disbelief as she saw Seraphine standing before her. The old familiarity was there in her gaze, along with a deep, unspoken pain. "Seraphine," she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe it. I didn't think you'd ever return." For a long moment neither spoke. The air between them was heavy, charged with the years of absence and betrayal that lay like an insurmountable chasm between them. Finally Lysandra spoke, her voice raw, her hands shaking. "Do you hate me?" she asked. "For what I did. For what I had to do. The village, we all thought you were a danger, a threat." "I never wanted to be a threat," Seraphine replied, her voice cracking. "I never asked for this curse. I didn't ask for you to turn away from me." Lysandra's face contorted with emotion, a deep guilt seeping through the cracks of her defenses. "I was scared, Seraphine. I didn't know what to believe. I thought if I stood with you the curse would consume us both. I thought it would destroy everything." Seraphine's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to force Lysandra to understand. But she knew that her anger wouldn't heal the wounds between them. The truth was she had been just as afraid of the power she couldn't control, afraid of the monster the village had made her out to be. "You left me," Seraphine whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "When I needed you the most, you turned your back on me. You didn't even try to understand what I was going through." Lysandra's tears began to fall freely, her walls crumbling as she stepped forward. "I'm so sorry, Seraphine. I should have stayed. I should have fought for you." Seraphine's heart softened, the anger and pain inside her ebbing as she realized that forgiveness might be the only way forward, not just for Lysandra but for herself. She had changed, she had learned to accept the curse, to transform it into a source of power. Now she had to learn to accept the betrayal too. "I've changed, Lysandra," Seraphine said softly. "And I don't know what the future holds for us, but I can't keep holding on to the past. You were my friend. I can still remember the girl who stood by me." Lysandra took a shaky breath, her hands reaching for Seraphine's. "Then let's build a new future. Together." As Seraphine stood at the threshold of the village, the weight of the past pressing heavily on her, a deeper truth began to stir within her, one that could not be ignored. The Song of Power, once a mysterious and unsettling force, had now become a guide, a voice that echoed in her soul, urging her to listen carefully. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village square, Seraphine felt an almost physical pull to the sacred ruins just beyond the village, a place where her curse had first manifested. There, at the heart of the old temple ruins, stood a stone altar, its surface worn with time, its markings long faded. The air was thick with an energy that trembled in the bones of the earth, and as Seraphine approached, the Song of Power swelled in her ears, louder now, guiding her toward the truth. It was not just a call, it was a revelation. A voice, not her own, whispered in the depths of her mind, seeking to reveal the truth she had always been blind to. It was then that she understood, the curse had never been a curse at all. It was a marking, a blessing, and an ancient rite of passage. The power that had been branded into her flesh was not something to be feared. It had been placed upon her long before she was born, long before the village ever knew her name. The true origin of the magic that flowed through her was tied to a prophecy, a forgotten promise made centuries ago, long before the village came to be. In that moment, the past rushed forward like a river breaking through a dam. The village, her people, they had always misunderstood her. The curse was not a punishment but a test, a trial that she had been destined to face. The marks upon her skin, the magic she had feared, had been given to her by those who once walked the earth as its guardians, beings who had shaped the land itself with their power. They had left behind their legacy, and Seraphine was the one chosen to bear it. Her bloodline, unknowingly intertwined with the ancient guardians, carried their legacy. The curse was not a punishment for some transgression. It was the awakening of a dormant power within her, waiting for the moment when she could harness it to fulfill her true destiny. The song's true purpose ***. The Song of Power was never meant to undo the curse, it was never meant to free her. The song had been placed in the world for one reason, to awaken the ancestral magic that lay within her. The song was a key and Seraphine was the chosen heir. It resonated with her, amplified her power, and guided her to the mounting because the ancient guardians had seen the coming darkness, the unseen war that would soon sweep across the land. They had left behind their gifts to prepare her, to prepare someone who could wield their power when the time came. The curse, the magic, the trial, it was all a preparation. But the revelation went even deeper. It was not just about Seraphine, it was about the world. The village, the land, the people, they were all connected by a single thread, and the curse she had carried was meant to bind her to that thread. She had always believed the curse was a burden, an ailment to be cured, but in truth, it had been a gift all along. The blessing of the gods, a binding force that would give her the strength to unite the factions and wield the power to stop the coming chaos. The mounting energy she had felt from the very start, the connection to the land, to the song, and to the ancient force, had been leading her to this moment. She was the chosen conduit, the savior, not of the village she had once called home, but of the world itself. With this knowledge came a new weight. What now? Her role had never been to undo the curse or to seek forgiveness. She could not go back to the village and beg for their acceptance. They had already cast her out once, labeling her as a danger without understanding. Now she stood as something more, something greater than they could ever comprehend. Her power was too immense, too dangerous to be held by the hands of those who had once feared her. The song had given her the clarity to see that justice was not something to be found in their eyes. The power she had gained from the mounting was not for personal vengeance but for the greater good. If she confronted them now, it would be for nothing more than a sideshow, a display of strength with no true purpose. She could not waste her newfound power on petty retribution. Instead, she saw the bigger picture, the darkness that loomed beyond the village, the world outside that was teetering on the brink of collapse. The song had not chosen her to rule over her people. It had chosen her to bring about the change that was needed on a much larger scale. Her duty, Seraphine realized, was not to heal the wounds of her past, but to prevent the world from bleeding into oblivion. Her task was now to face the true enemy, those who sought to corrupt the world, those who believed the power of the gods was theirs to control. The ancient prophecy had not been about a kingdom or a village, it was about a force, a reckoning, a balance of power that was meant to be restored. With the truth now in her hands, Seraphine stood taller than ever before. She no longer felt the weight of shame or guilt that had once shackled her. She was free, not just from the curse, but from the chains of misunderstanding that had bound her for so long. She could feel the power humming in her veins, and it was no longer something she feared. It was a tool, a weapon, a force to be wielded with purpose. As the villagers continued to watch from the shadows, Seraphine took one final look at the place that had once been her home. She felt the sting of old wounds but also the weight of new purpose. The time had come to leave the village behind, not in hatred but in peace, knowing that her journey was not here. Her future lay in the hands of the song and the destiny it had awakened. Justice would come, not in the form of a reckoning against those who wronged her, but in the action she would take to protect the balance of the world. The true battle was not for personal redemption but for the survival of the world itself.